Oh, welcome back. This week, the fine fellers and fellettes at O'Reilly want to help you better understand some vice grip vocabulators and find me some make it happeners for my go in the town rigs. So let's give them a call.
The internet says Vice Grip Garage was canceled, but that's only part of the story. What really happened left fans confused, sparked endless speculation, and raised more questions no one wanted to answer. So why didn't Derek Bieri set the record straight? Which show got the axe? The one they loved or the one they barely watched?
Pretty much all we need. Did I just get in a car wreck? What just happened? Oh my gosh, the brakes.
Join us as we uncover what really happened to Vice Grip Garage and why the truth isn't what most people think. The real cancellation. There's a blank tile in a streaming app tonight, sitting exactly where Derek Bieri's face used to be, and thousands of Vice Grip Garage fans are convinced they know exactly why it's there. The show was Roadworthy Rescues, and it aired on Motor Trend. Its host was Derek Bieri, a Tennessee family man with a beard, a back that had clocked 30 years of overtime long before anyone handed him a camera, and a fan base that had spent years watching him drag dead cars out of collapsing barns like a mechanic-shaped search and rescue team. Here's the part that tripped everyone up. Motor Trend's show shared almost nothing with his real career except the man standing in front of the camera. Derek's actual home, the place he'd built brick by brick with his own two hands, was a YouTube channel called Vice Grip Garage. Two shows run by two very different owners, and one name similar enough that half the internet didn't bother checking which one had gone dark. That mix-up did all the damage by itself. Within days, fans were posting the same panicked questions. Had Derek been fired? Had the show flopped? Had something happened to him that nobody wanted to say out loud? Nobody had answers, because nobody at Motor Trend bothered giving any. There was no farewell episode or even a thank you note to a decade of loyal Wednesday nights. Just a gap on the schedule, and a comment section convincing itself something terrible had happened to a guy who was, at that exact moment, still covered in grease in his own garage, blissfully unaware he was supposedly the main character in his own tragedy. Derek didn't do anything to deserve it. Roadworthy Rescues got pulled because the company behind Motor Trend was drowning in a number so large it barely qualified as a business problem anymore. A debt load that made ratings and interviews completely irrelevant to the decision. Somewhere in a boardroom, a beloved car show became a line item, and line items don't get farewell tours. Meanwhile, over on the channel that built his career, absolutely nothing changed. Vice Grip Garage kept uploading exactly on schedule, new barn finds and all, and hadn't skipped a single week. It just had the misfortune of sharing a name with the one that had. Try explaining that nuance, though, to a comment section that had already decided its favorite mechanic had vanished off the face of the earth. Corrections travel at the speed of a guy typing carefully. Panic travels at the speed of a share button. Panic won easily for weeks. What none of those worried fans knew yet was that the story was bigger and stranger than one man losing one show. Derek wasn't an isolated casualty. He was one name buried inside something closer to a mass grave, and to understand why his career walked away from it without a scratch, the story has to rewind to the exact afternoon a struggling media giant decided an entire generation of car television simply wasn't worth the debt anymore. The Purge. Discovery didn't cancel one show that year. It canceled almost an entire genre of television in a single stretch of corporate housekeeping that started on November 18, 2024, a Monday that began like any other for Mike Finnegan until he opened Reddit and typed out the news himself, because nobody at the company had bothered to tell him through any official channel first. He'd only just learned it was over, and Season 13 had wrapped filming only a few weeks earlier. No specific reason was given to him for its demise. It was flat, unresolved, the kind of sentence that answers nothing. Roadkill went down that day after 13 seasons. Roadkill Garage went with it. So did Bitchin' Rides, Texas Metal, Iron Resurrection, Hot Rod Garage, Engine Masters, Faster with Newbern and Cotton, and Roadworthy Rescues, Derek's own show, caught in the same net. The number behind it had nothing to do with car culture at all. Discovery was reportedly carrying somewhere between $40 and $45 billion in long-term debt, with no clean path back to profit. Against a number that size, a beloved car show isn't a beloved car show anymore. It's a rounding error with a fan base, the corporate equivalent of finding loose change in the couch cushions and deciding it's still not worth bending over for. Freiberger found out he'd have to be the one to explain it, since Motor Trend clearly wasn't going to bother. So he filmed himself alone in his own garage, roughly the same production budget Derek had started with, and opened with the plainest line he had, a flat confirmation that his television shows had been canceled. Within the first minute, before he got into any of the history, he made a point of thanking the audience that had stuck around for 13 years of it. He walked through the parts fans always assumed were his fault and weren't, like the years the show got pulled off YouTube and shoved behind a paywall, something he'd fought against at the time. Down in the comments under that video, Finnegan added his own line, short and almost defiantly upbeat. This wasn't the end, just a see you later, and they'd figure out the next thing together. It read like two guys trying to convince themselves as much as their fans. What Freiberger did next said more about him than the cancellation ever could. When the company auctioned off the old Roadkill project vehicles, Freiberger didn't walk away and start fresh. He bought back several of his own former Roadkill builds, including the Dragoneer, the Jeep he kept wrenching on simply because he liked the name. The show was gone, but the actual machines, the ones fans had watched him fight with for over a decade, were still sitting right there waiting to be finished. And somewhere in that same wreckage sat Derek, whose show died in the same sweep, on the same day, for the same cold financial reason as everyone else's. On paper, he should have been standing in his own garage, typing out the same kind of announcement Finnegan had to write. He never had to. And the reason traces back to a decision he'd made years earlier that didn't look like a decision at the time. It looked like a guy with a bad back and a broken phone, filming himself in a garage nobody outside his own driveway had ever heard of. The quiet exit. Before any of this, Derek was a guy in a suit missing the feeling of grease under his fingernails, the kind of guy whose wrenching usually dies on weekends and never comes back. He didn't let his die. He watched shows like Roadkill and landed on one simple thought. He could probably do that too. He just had to learn how to film. There was no production plan and no equipment budget, so he taped a broken iPhone, one that hadn't made an actual phone call in months, to his own garage door. He dropped a small block engine and a 4-speed into an old Camaro and got the whole mess running on camera, alone, with nobody watching except whoever happened to click on it. That phone did more work in retirement than it ever did in service, and neither the phone nor the man behind it had any idea they were building what would eventually out-survive an entire television network. That channel became Vice Grip Garage, and it eventually grew into something Motor Trend wanted a piece of. When Derek signed on for Roadworthy Rescues, longtime fans on car forums voiced real concern about it at the time, worried that a big network deal might swallow the scrappy, budget-first spirit that made his channel worth watching in the first place. The fear was a reasonable read of how these arrangements had gone for people before him. The TV equivalent of a prenup nobody wanted to bring up out loud. What those worried fans didn't realize was that they'd correctly diagnosed the danger years before it showed up. They'd just aimed the worry at the wrong patient. Roadworthy Rescues was never going to devour Vice Grip Garage. It was the other way around, and it always had been. Vice Grip Garage was the real business, the one paying for groceries and orthodontist bills, a channel that had already climbed past 1.39 million subscribers by the time Roadworthy Rescues was even airing. Roadworthy Rescues was the flashy side hustle that occasionally showed up on cable and made his mother-in-law finally believe he had a real job. While a dozen other hosts had built their entire careers inside Discovery's walls, Derek had kept his own house standing the whole time, complete with his own audience, his own upload schedule, and his own P.O. box in Lewisburg, Tennessee, where strangers could still mail him broken machinery like it was Christmas morning every single week. His wife, Jessica, had been part of that world from day one, showing up on camera, running logistics during events. Their 3 sons grew up around the same channel, and the youngest, Bentley, ended up starting his own spin-off chronicling go-karts and dirt bikes with the same scrappy energy his dad started with. None of that belonged to Discovery. None of it was ever at risk, not for 1 second, when the axe finally came down on everyone else. So, when Roadworthy Rescues disappeared in the same purge, Derek didn't have to figure out what came next. He'd already been living the answer for years, 7 days a week, bad back and all. That side door had never been what held his career up. When it finally got sealed shut, Derek didn't have to write a single word about it, because the room he actually lived in had his name on the door the whole time. But if the real story really was this straightforward, a guy dodging a bullet nobody even realized was fired at him, why did the version everyone believed online end up so much darker, so much stranger, and so completely disconnected from anything that had happened? The manufactured victim. After more than 2 decades in the trade, Derek posted something on his own shop's page that had never happened to him before. Someone had broken into his garage and walked off with tools that were not theirs. He did not dress it up or make a production out of it. Just a short, first-person admission from a guy who had spent 20 years never once needing to think twice about locking up, followed by the same total silence about it that he would give any other bad day at the shop. No follow-up post naming a suspect, no update saying it got resolved. Whatever happened to the tools after that stayed exactly where it belonged, which was between Derek and whoever he had to deal with about it, not spread across a comment section. That kind of quiet is exactly the wrong kind of quiet for a comment section to sit with, and it didn't have to wait long to find something noisier to attach itself to. A few months earlier, Derek and his crew had rolled one of their own project trucks out in front of an actual crowd for a live build. A 1965 Chevy C10 they'd nicknamed Lawsuit years before, purely as a joke about how much grief the thing gave them every time it came off the lift. On July 30th, 2024, the build made it into Bang Shift's coverage under exactly that name, detailing Derek swapping a 4-barrel Holley Sniper EFI system onto the truck's straight-six engine, live, in front of fans, on a truck that had only around 200 miles on it since its last resurrection. It was the kind of stunt a guy pulls specifically because there was an audience there to see if it starts. And it did. Nothing about Lawsuit, the truck, had anything to do with courts, charges, or Derek's own legal standing. It was a nickname, but put a real burglary report and a truck named Lawsuit anywhere near each other in a search engine, and the algorithm can't tell a joke from a headline. Type Derek's name next to the word lawsuit today, and instead of finding a straight six getting an EFI swap in front of a cheering crowd, you get an entire cottage industry of AI-narrated videos claiming he's been sentenced to life imprisonment, that federal agents seized his cars, that a mystery business partner vanished with the evidence. One of them is even titled Derek Bieri from Vice Grip Garage sentenced to life imprisonment, complete with fabricated federal agents and forged documents, because, apparently, a guy welding a fender back onto a Camaro wasn't dramatic enough content on its own. None of it is tied to a single real court record, because none of it happened. Derek never addressed any of it. He just kept the shop open, dealt with the actual theft the way anyone deals with a real one, privately, and went right back to wrenching on the C-10 that, to this day, still answers to the name lawsuit. Somewhere in the replies under one of those fake videos, a subscriber who'd been mailing Derek broken carburetors for 6 years typed one line, "Is this true?" Nobody from Vice Grip Garage ever answered him directly. The next Wednesday upload did that instead. Another barn find with another engine turning over. So while a fabricated version of Derek was supposedly facing down federal charges in some AI-narrated video, the real one was still exactly where he'd always been. And what he was doing there is a far better ending than any invented courtroom drama could ever manage. The garage that never went dark. Picture the scene the internet insisted didn't exist. A Tennessee garage, mid-afternoon, an engine half-pulled and covered in 40 years of dust. And Derek exactly where he'd been every single week for over a decade, running a completely normal Tuesday, while a comment section held a funeral for him online. That was the actual answer, and it was almost anticlimactic in the best possible way. He never stopped. While strangers argued online about a collapse that never happened, he kept doing the one thing he'd been doing since a broken iPhone first got taped to a garage door: pulling dead machines out of fields that had long since given up on them and coaxing them back onto the road, one stubborn bolt at a time. Nobody at Discovery had ever owned so much as a single frame of Vice Grip garage footage, which is the whole reason there was nothing for them to take. A second channel, Vice Grip Lodge, hummed along untouched right beside it. Family life carried on exactly the way longtime fans would recognize, the one part no rumor mill could ever manufacture, because the truth was better than anything they invented. At a recent Sick Week Drag and Drive event, Jessica got behind the wheel for her first real taste of that world. The one that had already grown Vice Grip Garage past 2.5 million subscribers without a single network paycheck involved. She said it was everything she expected, and nothing she expected at the same time. She ran the logistics, packed the car, handled tire swaps and fuel by the end of the week, and came home hooked. Their sons grew up circling the same garage their whole lives, and the youngest, Bentley, still runs his own small channel under the same scrappy, held-together-with-duct-tape spirit that started this entire story. And in January 2026, Derek sat down with the Chris and Sandy Show for a long-form interview, where he said something that had nothing to do with engines. Fans kept coming up to him in tears, telling him his videos had gotten them through depression, grief, and isolation, especially during the pandemic. He never set out to be anyone's therapy. He just kept fixing dead cars on camera, and it turned out that watching a stubborn thing get saved is its own kind of medicine. Nothing about that story ever needed a scandal to be worth watching, and it still had that disclaimer running at the top of every video, insisting none of it was necessarily educational, which fooled absolutely nobody who'd learned to bleed their own brakes watching him do it first. He watched friends and fellow hosts lose the only version of car television they'd ever known. When Motor Trend's production company finally cleared out its garage, Derek didn't just watch from a distance. He showed up and bought the roadworthy rescues project cars back himself, DeLorean included, which meant a guy who'd spent a decade rescuing other people's dead cars from fields ended up hauling one out of a dying television studio instead. Same instinct, different kind of barn. The show that vanished was never the show that mattered. The one that mattered had been sitting in plain sight the whole time, uploading every single week, waiting for anyone paying attention to notice that nothing had ended at all. It had just been misfiled under the wrong name. Now that Vice Grip Garage clearly never needed a TV deal to thrive, should Derek even bother chasing another network show? Or is he better off staying fully independent for good? And out of everything Discovery wiped out in that single afternoon, which one do you think deserved a second chance the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.